Welcome back to this afternoon's section of the Planning Committee today. We will start with item number 10 on your agendas. I don't need to go through all the fire alarm stuff. There's not likely to be a fire alarm. If the alarm sounds, please do what the rest of us do. Okay, item number 10. So the paddock, Durley Street, Durley, and our presenting officer is Liz Young again. So over to you, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application relates to the retention of an additional 4 pitches which have been added to an established gypsy and traveller site. The plans also include changes to the layout which are necessary to accommodate the additional pitches. So this first slide shows the site location plan. The site lies in open countryside and is accessed from Durley Street, which runs along the southeast boundary. The closest residential property is Berkeley Farm, which lies to the southwest. The rest of the site is adjoined by open fields. This next slide shows the aerial view of the site, which is where the yellow star is. The red line shows the route of the nearest public right of way, which runs to the north of the site. You can see here the internal access road, which just runs along the northeast boundary of the site. So the location of this is to remain as it is, although it's been just upgraded, resurfaced in gravel. The overall size of the site is about half a hectare in size. While the additional mobile homes are already on the site, the layout of these is proposed to be changed to the layout shown on the submitted plans. The existing trees and hedgerows, which you can see along the boundary, are to be retained. Just to give some background, this next slide shows the approved site layout for the established 4 gypsy and traveller pitches on the site. This was allowed on appeal in 2016 and also included a permanent day room to each of the plots. That's these squares you can see just here. So following on from this, the Gypsy and Traveller Plan Development Plan document was adopted in 2019 and now includes the application site on its listed safeguarded permitted sites. This next slide shows the proposed layout. So each of the pitches would be averaging about 400 square metres in size. There'd be a separation of at least 6 metres between each mobile home. So each plot would consist of a mobile home, touring caravan, parking, cycle parking and bin storage. The plots would be subdivided by post and rail fencing and native planting, and the details of this would be secured by conditions. And also there would be other conditions which limit the overall number of caravans on the site, and also a timescale for implementing the proposed layout. There'd also be conditions ensuring the retention of trees and hedgerows on the boundary and a restriction on external lighting. No permanent day rooms form part of this proposal, as it's now the case that modern mobile homes are of a standard and size that generally avoid the need for additional permanent accommodation. Just moving on to the photos, this just shows the existing access, which is to remain as it is. No objections have been raised by Highways in relation to the proposal. This is the view looking back towards the access from within the site, looking along the northeast boundary. This is the view, so this is taken from the roadside plot, so the plot nearest the road, looking towards the northeast boundary and back towards the access. So this is a view, again, looking into the plot that's adjacent to the road. So that's the southernmost plot. This is the next plot as you go into the site, moving north, looking towards the boundary with Berkeley Farm. Just in terms of, well, for information, the proposed plans include post and rail fencing, so they would secure the removal of the existing close bordered fencing that's currently in place. It's just more photos of the existing plots within the site. This is just a photo taken in the northwest corner of the site, looking towards the boundary with Berkeley Farm. This is taken in the northeast corner of the site, looking towards the rear boundary with the fields. This is the view just looking back down towards the access, so from the rear of the site towards the front boundary, looking back towards Durley Street. These next few photos just show the view from the public right of way. So this is the view looking back towards the northeast boundary of the site. And this photo is the view looking towards the rear boundary of the site, again from the public right of way. That brings us to the end of the slides. Just in conclusion, it's recommended that permission should be granted, as it's considered that the general principle of introducing additional pitches to the site is supported by the development plan, and also there's a demonstrated need for the additional accommodation because of the changes to the pre-existing households on the site. It's considered that the additional impacts associated with the additional pitches can be mitigated by the conditions set out in the report. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. We now move to public speaking. And we have an objector, Toby Ross. You'd like to come forward, Mr. Ross? You switch on the microphone by pressing the button on the base, and you have 3 minutes from when you start speaking. So please take your time, settle in, and when you're ready. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. I'm just here to continue with my objection for this extension. The planning inspector allowed 4 pitches back in 2018 in June, and he went to a lot of effort and consideration to what should go there on it. What was originally a greenfield site. There's plenty of conditions being put in there, and the applicant has never adhered to any of those conditions. Lighting, fencing, shrub planting, positioning of static caravans. At one stage, there was 13 static caravans there. There's other concerns. Even on your latest pictures, all the hedgerow has now been buried in dirt. So all the trees are not to be buried round the base of the trees because that will end up killing them. There hasn't been any planting for any screening. On one of the conditions, the planning inspector put in, there was no fencing to be done. It's supposed to be to look like it was a more natural appearance of the site. He was concerned about the overall effect of the static caravans in their construction type. It was supposed to look like 4 static caravans positioned in a field rather than fenced in, which they are all now with fences. As he says in his report, have you seen the copy of the original planning inspector? Do you all have that, do you?
It's
Yes.
in the planning documents.
Yeah, okay. And it's at odds with the environment. And it will, with the 8 static caravans there, it will dominate that site completely. And it will be at odds to the general neighbourhood of Durley Village, which is a sporadic village with houses dotted along the main street there. Also, yes, by having it all fenced as it is, and what they propose to fence, it will be isolated from the community, which is something they didn't want to do with the planning inspectorate. I don't understand why, after all the planning inspectorate's work, they can still go to another planning application for something more. And this was considered over a long period, and they appealed for it, got permission, but they didn't adhere to any of the permissions they were given. Even to one of the situations where they were told the enforcement, which it always seems to be put onto pause while that application goes in. So since 2018, we've had a continuation of changes.
Thank you. I'm afraid that's the end of your 3 minutes, but you've been very eloquent. Thank you very much. If you could just pause for a minute, if members of the committee have got any questions of clarification for you. Yes, Councillor Lee.
Thank you. I'm just curious to know, are you a neighbour of this, your immediate neighbour, or?
I'm an immediate neighbour.
And you've been resident there for, well, since 2018 by the sounds of it, is that right?
Sorry?
You've been resident there since 2018?
I've been a resident there for 24 years.
24 years.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ross. Oh, Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Ross, can you tell me, you mentioned that enforcement have been notified of some of these alleged breaches. Can you tell me if any investigation or any output has been received by yourselves as a result of the investigations?
Was that a question of clarification, Councillor Cunningham?
Yes, it is, because he
I think it's a question for the officer.
stated that he had made a.
I think it's a question for the officer.
Okay.
Because they'll be able to give you more information, I'm sure.
Okay, Liz.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. If you could just switch off the microphone as you go. Unless there are any more questions. No, thank you very much. And now we have Steve Delmage from the Parish Council. Councillor Delmage, welcome. And you also have 3 minutes from when you start speaking. So yes, please do. Thank you.
Thank you and good afternoon. I think I'd like to start by correcting one point in the documentation. And it was mentioned that the closest residential property to the site is Berkeley Farm, which is some 20 metres from the perimeter of this site, which is true, but it neglects the fact that there is a bungalow in between Berkeley Farm building and the border of this property, of the land, and that is only 2 metres from the boundary of this site. So I think that's a significant omission from the documentation. Regarding the actual application, when you read the application, it says specifically this is to accommodate the extended family that is required to find accommodation for on the site. I think it's quite interesting, as I believe now, that 2 of those pitches have been sold to completely different families. Now, I guess we can all say that we're part of one big family if we look high enough up, but I do wonder whether that need for the extended family still continues. And in the application, and again, it was mentioned in the introduction, the day rooms have been dropped from this latest plan. And does that mean to say these are now no longer gypsy and traveller pitches? Because the definition of a gypsy and traveller pitch says and includes a day room. Now, I believe the day rooms have been left off because they cannot fit them in terms of the spacing of the site. But I fear that should this be passed as gypsy and traveller pitches, then those day rooms can subsequently be built without any further planning application needed, significantly increasing the crowding of the site. And talking of crowding of the site, if approved, this gives the basis for 16 residential caravans on this site, a mixture of static and touring caravans. The size of modern touring caravans, you can live quite reasonably in them. Now, that is a major issue in terms of safety. The Caravan Act of 1968, I think it is, states that there must be a minimum of 6 metres between each caravan. And I know on the current plan, there is 6 metres between each one. But if those touring caravans are also lived in, then they're significantly less than 6 metres apart. And that's a major fire risk. That's why that distance is specified. And then nobody wants a fire to occur, but should a fire occur on this site, I don't think any of us want it on our conscience that we approved a plan that put that many residential places on site. I think that's a major problem.
Very much. Members, do we have questions of clarification? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned the fire service. Durley is a very small parish. Where is your nearest fire station? And is that a
The nearest
fully
fire
manned
station
one, or
is
it a
Bishop's Orphan, which I believe is I'll look for my, it's a retained fire station. I thought it was, but I thought I'd better check.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the parish councillor? No, thank you very much indeed. You may return to your seat. Thank you. And now we have the ward councillor, Councillor Williams. You know the routine, Councillor Williams, and you have up to 5 minutes when you're ready. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak today. There is a large amount of opposition, as I'm sure you've seen on the council website in regards to this application, due to works having not taken place from the previous application conditions, reported unauthorised connections to the sewer network, reported antisocial behaviour ranging from noise complaints about loud arguments, pets, generators, dogs escaping onto residents' lands, and litter complaints from the public highway. There is also a great deal of opposition regarding works being carried out prior to approval. Although we may not agree with it, I know the committee has to weigh up retrospective planning applications in an equal stance to other planning applications. I just wanted to touch on the conditions mainly, really. On condition 1, in regards to the plots being designated specifically for travellers, there have been reports that these plots have been advertised to the wider public at commercial rates. Therefore, I had a question really around how will it be enforced that only travellers shall occupy the site, especially with an increasing need for travellers around the district. Then on condition 7, in regards to landscaping, it states the retention of existing trees, hedges, and hedges. The previous application's landscaping plan was never implemented. So I'm wondering whether this condition means hedges should stay as they currently are, or whether they should conform to the previous planning application that was permitted upon appeal. On regards to sewage, I know septic tanks were a part of the original application. However, it is now said they will connect to the main sewer. I have questions around whether this has happened already, whether Southern Water have had any communications regarding to this, as there have been reports that there has been unauthorised connections to the sewer network taken place already. In regards to the tourers as well, there's a great deal of concern that the 16 families will occupy the site in using the touring caravans to have permanent residents as well. So can it be conditioned that the touring caravans are ancillary to the static caravans, or potentially that they are not allowed to be occupied overnight? For overnight accommodation. This is also a worry around the nitrate calculations to whether the touring caravans will be occupied overnight as well. And then permitted development rights was something that was removed upon the previous planning application on appeal. And I just wanted any clarification to whether that would carry over to this application, or whether there'd have to be a separate condition in regards to the permitted development rights that were previously removed. And then finally, although the applicant is not here today, I would urge them to engage with the parish council so that concerns that residents are raised around non-material planning matters and complaints I mentioned earlier can be addressed, because after all, they will be members regardless. So I would hope that there would be a cohesive sort of engagement around neighbourly use going forwards.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for our councillor? No, I think that was very clear. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. You may return to your seat. Just a second, please. Is Mr. Castle here? I'm minded to allow you to speak, Mr. Castle, because although you haven't registered to speak in time. I think there are quite a lot of questions that were asked, as you will have listened, that perhaps you could respond to. And members may have questions for you as well. Is that all right? I think that will be fine. So you have 3 minutes. This is a supporter. This is Mr. Tony Castle. Thank you.
So I think really I'll start with when we first got approval 5 or 6 years ago, you know, it was all very new to us as well. We didn't fully understand planning and legislation and all the, you know, drawings and how everyone had to conform. And I think also where I was with, although we're all one big family, but we're sort of everyone's separate in their own units. And I think it was difficult to work together without, you know, basically just to get everyone in order. But one of the original applicants, my father-in-law's got 9 children. Since the planning was approved, 4 of these have now got families of their own. So I think that in itself demonstrates a clear need for the extra plots, and that's without taking into account anybody else on the site. That's just him. And within the next sort of 3 or 4 years, another 2 or 3 will probably get married just out of those. The site has become quite untidy, but that's a lot to do with, you know, through COVID and stuff, we couldn't go to work and financial situations. Some of the fencing that have already been done, you know, hasn't been done with the post and rail and the thing, but obviously so if we was to get this permission, we would do that. We basically just want to get the site in order with an approved plan that we can all work towards, and we know exactly what to do. So that's all.
Very much. Now, I'm sure members have got some questions. Please, can these be questions of clarification and nothing else? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chairman. You've heard the comment earlier that some of the plots have already been sold. Can you confirm or deny that?
Yeah, so the plots haven't been sold. It's just new family members moved in, hasn't been sold.
Can I ask, do you understand that if you get this planning permission, that there are 8 plots?
Yeah.
And despite the fact that family members keep getting married and having their own families and so on, you won't be allowed any more
No.
plots on this site, because that's the absolute maximum that our officers consider is reasonable on this site. So you
Yeah.
understand that? So
Of course, that's all the room that's there. And also I'd like to just quickly pick up on the touring caravans will certainly not be for residential use. They're literally, we just use those to go away in the summer. And if you attend the site now, there's actually, I don't think there's one on the site, you know.
Happy for a condition that they should be ancillary to the static caravans.
Yeah, of course.
Don't know if that's possible, Liz, but perhaps we could consider that later. And the situation with day rooms, is that no longer necessary with modern caravans?
So yeah, with the original application, it was because we was only going for 4 plots, and as I said, like my father-in-law had 9 children, so you know they sort of use it as somewhere to spend the day, watch TV and things like that. But with the new mobile homes, they're much more open plan, and the day rooms just aren't needed. And because also like some of the older mobile homes, the toilets was not in use, so they used to use the day rooms, but now it's all a lot yeah, up to a much better standard these days.
And you understand that if given this planning permission, you must comply with all the conditions that are given to you. Do you
Yeah.
understand that?
So now we understand the planning a lot better. You know, before this, I've never done anything like this before, so it was all new to me. But we're all in agreement that the site needs to come up to a good standard. I mean, we all want to live in a better standard, and it has just fallen away. But you know, it's something we're definitely going to get on top of.
Yeah, I don't think there are any more. Oh, Councillor Reid, another question?
So could you just tell me how many children are actually currently living on site?
Yep. So Benji on plot 4 is behind me. He's got 4. My father-in-law's got 9, but only 4 is on site, and I've got 3. So that's 8, not 11.
School age children?
So 6 to 10 school year.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. If you could switch the microphone off as you go back to your seat. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, members. Okay, so Liz, do we have any additional comments before we go to questions, please?
No, just one point in relation to foul drainage. Southern Water did comment on the application. And generally, just to summarise the situation, the original proposal was for each unit to be served by a septic tank, and this is not supported for various reasons. So they're no longer part of the proposal, and there's a drainage condition as set out in the report, which requests further details, the preference being to connect to main sewage. If not, then it would likely be a packaged treatment plant that serves the whole site. I'm not aware of any, I don't know the full situation in terms of whether there's any unauthorised connections to the main sewage. It's not been mentioned by Southern Water if there is. That's it, thanks.
Liz, members, questions on the whole report? But if you could just mention the number of the page you're referring to, Councillor Lamy.
Yes, I just wanted to understand how this related to the nitrates and whether they've been calculated and come within the normal limits that we would expect, or doesn't that apply to mobile homes?
It does apply to mobile homes. It applies to all overnight accommodation. Which explains why in the conditions we've requested the calculations and appropriate mitigation. So that would be tied up with the means of foul drainage disposal. So that would affect the final nutrient budget and how much mitigation we need to secure as part of that. We'd then consult Natural England as part of that process.
Can we give planning permission prior to this being all sorted out or not?
Natural England have commented saying they're happy for the grampian condition to be imposed. They're happy with that process.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Just reading the PDP, which is still in force. On page 35, the provision for children's play space. As we've heard from the applicant, there are a number of children on the site. The proposed layout shows no provision for play for the younger children. Also there, Chairman, it says about essential facilities such as a small amenity block. Again, has already been mentioned, that small amenity block doesn't exist on any of the sites at all. Can I hear really what the officer's answer to these breaches are?
In terms of the approved layout, there was no sort of communal amenity block, although there were day rooms. But in terms of the play space, it's considered there's sufficient space within each plot. They range between just under 400 to about 450 square metres with additional space around them. It's considered there's enough amenity space across the site. We just, on balance, it just wouldn't be a ground alone to refuse the application on the absence of a communal block, given that that's not part of the approved layout for the site.
Councillor Lee, you have your microphone on. Is that because you'd like to ask a question?
Well, as you kindly ask, yes, I do have a question.
I shouldn't have asked, should I?
I'm slightly perplexed. There are, as we've heard, previous planning provision or permission indicated certain things need to be done. Some of those things haven't been done. Does that mean they won't be done? Where are we? And can we be assured that they will be done in the future when we've got new provisions as part of the site application? Thank you.
Yeah, as you can see in the report, there's a timescale for implementing the approved layout. Because we have those conditions, if it came to light that they weren't implemented in the agreed timescale, we could serve a breach of condition notice, I understand from talking to enforcement. So all the conditions, well, in writing the condition, they have all been agreed with planning enforcement, so work quite closely with them as part of this application. But just the likelihood of whether or not something might be implemented and wouldn't necessarily give us grounds to refuse the application. We do have that option to serve a breach of condition notice, as I say.
If I may, Chair, I mean, it's, we've heard from the parish council, it seems to me there's concerns and frustrations that certain things haven't been done. So should we not draw a line and get these things done before we move on to this new application?
I don't think it's reasonable, Councillor Lee, any more than for any other application to say these are the conditions, and if they're not met, we will take enforcement action. I think that's what you would be saying, Mrs. Pinnock.
Yeah, I mean, what I'd say is that the previous planning permit, they are seeking a different planning permission today. So, you know, you're almost parking what was before and saying, is what's in front of you acceptable? If it is, it will be subject to the conditions listed in your paper. And you can't, you know, you can't factor in people's behaviour, whether they're going to comply or not. Those are not reasonable reasons to refuse planning permission. You have to abide by the tests in the national regulations. We believe these conditions meet those tests, and therefore we're recommending approval to you on the basis of that. And you have to leave that to another process, and you can't hold that to account here in this planning committee.
Yes, and I would add the applicant is here. I've allowed him to speak. We've questioned him, and I'm sure he's taking on board everything that we are saying this afternoon. So, you know, let's have goodwill there and assume that he will abide by the law, which is effectively what it is. Liz, I've got a couple of questions, if I may. So we were asked if we could condition that the touring caravan should be ancillary to the static caravans and not used for permanent accommodation on the site. Is that possible? And also, I was trying to see if the permitted development rights is that condition 9? No, that's something else. Is the removal of PDR carried over into this application? And if not, can we do that, please?
Thank you, Chair. With the ancillary use, we could just think about wording. We could condition the touring caravans so that they can't be occupied as self-contained units accommodation. So on the permitted development right, the condition which requires the implementation of the layout with an agreed timescale. So that's condition number 4, says at the end, approved layout shall remain thereafter for the lifetime of the approved development unless otherwise agreed in writing. But so in a way that does seek to restrict additional buildings, but if you thought it was necessary to add just for completeness a further condition, we could do. But condition 4 is seeking to achieve that effectively.
Thank you, Chair. I've just had a quick look at the appeal decision and the PD condition, for example, condition 9, which is being proposed. The current application mirrors the inspector's appeal decision to do with post and rail fencing. Your condition 9 says effectively that no enclosure shall be erected within the site other than those included on the approved drawings. The appeal inspector at condition 15 said almost exactly the same, subject to obviously the plan which was submitted at that point in time. One of the ward councillors did mention too about the enforceability of this being limited in condition to those Gypsy and traveller status. That, I'm afraid, is a standard model condition. The inspector put that on the original appeal decision too. So if the inspector feels it's good, fair, reasonable and enforceable, likewise it will be advised that the same condition should also be applied. So in sum, the conditions before you today mirror, to all intents and purposes, to some degree, what the inspector did on the appeal decision. Oh, yes, and thank you. Julie's just reminded me on condition 2, we can, for example, in relation to the touring caravan, we could add in there, no overnight residential occupation of any touring caravans while stored on site. So it covers overnight, it covers residential, it covers occupation, and it also covers any touring caravans, not only those which the applicant has said will currently be there, but also any which will appear in the future.
I think that would reassure neighbours and the parish council. So if we could add that, please. Okay, can I just ask about the boundary treatment between the plots? So I think on our plan that those are hedges. So is the proposal to take down the close boarded fencing that is currently there and to replace it with hedges?
That's correct. So in terms of the proposed plan and what we would be approving, that would be post and rail fencing between the plots and native planting, which would secure as the part of the landscaping condition. So the close bordered fencing would have to be removed effectively.
I hope you're taking note over there. Thank you. Right, Councillor Reid.
Can you confirm whether this application site will have any bearing on the 5-year land supply for the future? I know the answer.
I can confirm, Chair, that would have a positive impact on counting towards our statutory duty to have a 5-year land supply. Even though what, sorry?
Being used.
Well, it's an
Before
increase.
the new plan.
It's an increase from 4, isn't it, to 8?
Any more questions, members? So we move to debate. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm assuming the same thank you. This particular site, I went and looked at it. And I must admit, it looks under the proposal to be a very cramped condition. The previous site allowed by the inspector is 4, gave people a reasonable amount of room to maneuver around. This one, I'm afraid, it looks extremely restrictive. The removal of the children's play area does worry me because children like to play together. There are only small parcels within those blocks where children can play. If all the children wanted to play together, there's a problem. The concerns raised by third parties, some 19 in the report on page 182, sadly, I recognise from previous application sites in and around the district, my own being one of them. And to be quite honest, enforceability is a major problem, without a shadow of a doubt. It's taking up a lot of time for officers. We've already heard that what controls were put in before are not being enforced. And that is my gravest worry. All we're doing is expanding this. I believe the number that have been requested of 8 is an overdevelopment of this particular site. It is a very confined site. So I will not be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. I too have visited the site, well, driven past the site, had a good look. And whilst I agree it is the maximum that one could accept on this site, I do think that given the planning history of this site, that it is reasonable, but no more. I think this is the absolute maximum that this site could take. So in my view, I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation, but I would say to the applicant, these conditions are very serious. It's very important that you get the water, the drainage, the landscaping, and all the other conditions that are being talked about today and will be in your documents should the planning committee agree to approve this, you need to take those very seriously and do what it says, because otherwise we will be taking enforcement action. And as I say, this is absolutely at the maximum of what this site can take. So any more caravans will have to go elsewhere, I'm afraid. But I would be supporting the officer recommendation with the very strict conditions that we are imposing on you. No, I'm sorry, you've had your 3 minutes, I'm sorry. Any more contributions to debate, members? So we move to the decision then. So can I see all those in favour of the officer recommendation to approve this planning application?
Six, Chair.
And those against?
Up to
3.
3.
So that application is approved with the very strict conditions, which I hope you will stick to, and the additions to the condition and to condition 2 as approved. Thank you very much, members. And we will take a couple of minutes whilst we change officers. Thank you. Okay, members, if you could just take your seats again, and we will continue with today's agenda. And our final item on the agenda for applications is item number 11, which is an application to confirm a tree preservation order at home base in Eastern Lane, Winchester. And our presenting officer is John Bartlett. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm here today to seek the confirmation of TPO 2342. So just to give you some background, originally an application was submitted to create a drive-through and reconfigure the car park. Part of the application was to remove the hornbeam tree to which the CPO relates. And it's located, it's not less visible in the aerial photos, but it's just on the corner of the roundabout with the star there, and it's pointed out with the arrow there. And there it is. It's more visible without the aerial photos there in that location. So after receiving this information that it was under threat of removal, we decided to TPO the tree. And the main objections that we've received centre around the merits of the individual merit of the tree concerned, and also that the City Council haven't demonstrated that the tree is worthy of protection. First of all, in terms of the worthiness of the tree, we carried out a tempo assessment, and the score came to a score which would mean that the tree is worthy of a TPO. It's clearly visible from the public domain as you come in off the roundabout into the Homebase store, and also from the car park. So there's a clear level of public visual amenity to road users and also to customers that use the Homebase complex. So our recommendation is to confirm this TPO. Thank you.
Thank you, John. We now move to public speaking, and we have the objector, Danny Simmons. Mr. Simmons, good afternoon. If you'd like to come forward, and you will have 3 minutes from when you start speaking. So please take your time, and you can switch on the microphone by pressing the button at the bottom of the unit. Thank you.
Committee, good afternoon. My name is Danny Simmons. I'm from RPS, and I'm acting on behalf of Royal London, who is the objector to the TPO and is also the landowner, the freehold owner of the whole Homebase site. As Mr. Bartlett explained, Royal London have a proposal for a new drive-through unit on the site. But this scheme was amended specifically in order to ensure that the hornbeam tree subject to this order was retained, and also respecting its root protection area. And those proposals, as amended, are now the subject of a planning permission granted by your council in November of last year. Royal London intend to implement the permission, and accordingly the tree is no longer under threat. And indeed, the provisional TPO had its desired effect in forcing Royal London to change the scheme in order to ensure that the tree was retained and also that its root protection area was protected as well. But notwithstanding that position, Royal London and their professional advisors remain of the view that the hornbeam tree is not of outstanding quality and is not worthy of a TPO. The tree in question is an early mature hornbeam with a normal form and is in normal condition. It's 5.5 meters in height, so it's not a particularly large tree. As I say, we take the view that it's not of individual merit. And as you will pick up from the aerial photo, there are lots of other trees nearby, including other hornbeam trees, and therefore we take the view that it's only of limited amenity value. The tree has been classified as a category B tree, a tree of moderate quality by Royal London's arboriculturalist, and my understanding is that that position is accepted by the council, by Mr. Bartlett, as set out in your committee report. And as Mr. Bartlett explained, he has undertaken a tempo assessment which in his view achieves a score of 16 points. And that was something we only picked up recently. We've undertaken our own assessment, which has given a score of 13 points. And accordingly, whilst the tree is qualified for consideration of a TPO, based on this scoring, it's failed to do so convincingly. And that information has recently been shared with Mr. Bartlett. So in summary, we take the view that the TPO should be withdrawn and that the tree is not worthy of that preservation. Thank you.
Members, questions of clarification? No, thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Gordon Smith, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, could you clarify? You adjusted this scheme for the drive-through to retain the tree.
Yeah.
And you're now putting that scheme forward for planning permission. And having adjusted your design to keep the tree, you're now just saying the tree's not worth keeping.
That is correct.
Well, to paraphrase.
Yeah.
But does that then mean you're going to adjust your design?
No, if I can explain, it's a good question. We did amend the scheme in order to ensure that the tree was retained. So we now have a planning permission which incorporates the amendment. So based on the planning permission, the tree is retained. So if we implement the permission, which is the intention, the tree will remain. The reason that we continue to object to the TPO is partially on a matter of principle, but also that if the TPO is confirmed, it will represent a legal charge on the site. And that is something that ideally we want to avoid. But no, for the avoidance of doubt, we want to implement the permission we've got, and that permission will ensure that the tree is retained.
Thank you.
Councillor Gordon Smith, if you could just switch off your microphone, thank you. Any further questions? No? Thank you very much indeed. If you could return to your seat, please, Mr. Simmons. Thank you. Did you want to add anything, John, to what you said earlier?
Yes, please, Madam Chair. Yeah. So just to cover the scoring on the tempo assessment that RPS have come up with the art consultant, it kind of the lower score is based on the fact that they say that there's a lower threat level, but the threat level for us is still higher. So that would bring the score above 13 towards kind of 16 or 17 points, which would mean that it would definitely merit a TPO. Even if it was to score 13 points, the TPO would still be defensible. Now, there are a number of other surrounding trees on this site. However, this tree is clearly visible on its own individual merit on the edge of the roundabout there, on the edge of the car park. And to our minds, that this tree is still worthy of a TPO. And we've evaluated this with the tempo methodology. And of course, this wasn't an original plan, so there has been an intention to remove this tree. Once a TPO, if that is removed from protecting that tree, then that tree is immediately vulnerable to being removed at any given time. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions for our officer? Councillor Edwards.
Yes, just as context or background here, could you say a little bit more about the tempo scheme, whether this is universally used by local authorities in cases like this, and how it can be challenged by another arboriculturalist, and how we should consider that?
Yeah, so the tempo methodology is widely used by many local authorities to assess the expediency of the tree preservation order. The main difference in scoring it is to do with the threat level, which makes the score either lower or higher. And so that's the main difference here in our assessment. But we both agree that it's highly suitable. On the tempo assessment, it's scored as 5, being highly suitable for protection. So, yeah, as I say, the main difference is in the level of threat, but that's but even with 13 points, the TPO would still be defensible according to the tempo methodology.
Yes, Mrs. Pinnock.
I just wondered, Chair, it is only an observation. If the TPO isn't confirmed and the planning permission isn't implemented, the tree isn't protected. That's the position, isn't it? I think that's where John leads him to the threat level is high. I just want to say it out in that way, Chair.
Councillor Pett, have you got a question?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a clarification, really. So, as I understand it, the purpose of a TPO is to counter a threat, largely. So, objectively, if the design was changed to preserve the tree, and that design is now being implemented, then the threat has been removed. So, what does the council perceive the ongoing threat to be to the tree?
I think Mrs. Pinnock just covered that.
I didn't quite understand what Mrs. Pinnock was saying there.
So they have got planning permission
Right.
for a drive-through, which I believe, from what I gather, it ensures the retention of the tree. They haven't implemented that planning permission yet. It's not been engaged. So the temporary TPO is protecting that tree. If the TPO isn't confirmed today and they don't implement that planning permission, there's no control over that tree at all. Whilst there's been a scheme with it protected in terms of its layout, that permission hasn't been implemented
But
yet,
unless
so we
they
don't
come
have
up
any.
with an alternative proposal that does require the tree to be removed, there's no extant threat, is there?
Well, there would be a threat, wouldn't there, if there's no planning permission implemented. There's therefore no condition control on the retention of the
I
tree.
might be perceived to be being obtuse, but if they had never put the planning application in, there would have been no perceived threat to the tree. That reasonable?
Yeah, I'd say so, wouldn't you? It came about as a result of the intention to develop that site.
So there's now a planning approval in place that preserves the tree.
If implemented.
Okay, but even if it's not implemented, there is no active threat to the tree. As I say, I can't see why.
I think the problem, Councillor,
fundamentally changed.
is that planning permissions can be changed.
Of course, yes.
And the initial view was that that tree was in the way and their preferred design involved getting rid of the tree. Now, if we didn't confirm the TPO, the potential would be there for them to just cut down the tree and then say, oh, the tree's not there anymore. So now we can go back to our preferred design, which was to go through where the tree is.
Indeed.
So putting the TP on the tree just means that they will definitely not be tempted to do that.
Madam Chairman, perhaps I can help. So the expediency assessment under tempo factors points based upon level of threat. And I think that's where, Councillor Pett, you're driving at. What is the level of threat here? The assessment allocates points based upon degree of threat. So known threat to tree, maximum amount of points. Foreseeable threat to tree, less so. Perceived threat to tree, less so. Precautionary only, less so. Tree known to be an actionable nuisance, 0 points. So it's along that modicum, and I hope that helps explain how the methodology in terms of expediency for preservation or protection of the tree exists. The points are allocated on that continuum. Known threat, foreseeable threat, perceived threat, precautionary only, or just the tree seen as a nuisance in the way.
Gotcha. So if we reduce that to foreseeable or something like that, it's still within the bracket.
Quite, Councillor Pett, but you've heard on the objector's own evidence that it still meets the criteria under 13 points, which means it's defensible.
Thank you for all that clarification. Councillor Lamy.
Going back in my mind, I seem to remember we had a planning application of home base area itself. So therefore, they were looking at changing that building at some stage. So there must be some form of threat still in existence if home base disappears.
Could I answer? I think yes, but I think we've established that the tree it is good enough to get a TPO, whatever the level of threat perceived. So, right. Any more questions? So debate? No debate. So this TPO is recommended for confirmation. Can I see all those in favour of confirming this TPO?
Unanimous, Chair. No.
All members, lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, John. So we're now going to have a quick look at the quarterly appeals, which you will have on your documents. Mrs. Pinnock, would you like to introduce the report, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think, I wasn't necessarily intending to be at committee today, so Lorna Hutchins was going to be here, but unfortunately couldn't be here today, so I'm standing in. I suppose what I noted when I looked at the report, and obviously I see the appeals as they come in anyway, was in the quarter we had 13 what I'm going to call planning appeals, against planning applications, such as like you might determine here or we determine under delegated powers for you. And I asked them to put this summary in, which I thought was quite useful. So 7.7% were allowed, 77% dismissed, although what I've done is I've added the invalid out of time one there because that takes up to an 84% success rate, and then there was a split decision. So we aim to national guidance and our own performance indicator is that we look to achieve at least a 70% success rate. So I feel quite satisfied that in the majority we are winning appeals, and that's shown, isn't it, through the paper, and I'm happy to take questions on individuals. What Lorna had thought would be helpful this time was to bring you an update on our progress on appeals through our enforcement service. So this is where we've served enforcement notices, and the team, as you can see, have been quite busy in the last year with 17 appeals with enforcement notices, and it's split here as 70.5% dismissed and 29.5% withdrawn. I might say to you that someone that's withdrawn their appeal must think that they don't have a chance of success, and actually you could count that as 100% in my view, Chair. I know it's semantics, but there we are. So and then you've got the Appendix 1 and Appendix 2 with the sort of summary of each appeal, the address and whether it was allowed, dismissed, and whether there were costs. I'm happy to take questions on them as best as I can, Chair, or maybe come back at another time if there's a delving question that I don't know the answer to.
Thank you very much. I think we need to congratulate our planning and enforcement teams on this excellent result. No costs allowed in any event, and only one appeal allowed. So I think if we could pass on our congratulations to the whole team, that would be great. Councillor Cunningham and then Councillor Pett. Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to congratulate the team as well, by the way. Fantastic result. Can you just tell me if the inspector's decision is actually attached to the application itself on the portal as well?
Yeah, they're all, for every application, if you go into the planning website, it's linked to the case reference number. But we do circulate them when they come into the relevant ward member and parish, so you might find old ones on your email as well, but we do save them to each case.
Interested in one, so
Very quick ones, I hope. This is presumably Winchester and South Downs cases that Winchester have dealt with.
This report relates solely to Winchester City Council appeals, because we don't report in the same way for the South Downs, and we don't have a mechanism to do so because they are a much wider body. So they report back to their committee on appeal success across the national park.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much indeed. I think that's it self-explanatory, and we, as I say, we do congratulate both enforcement and planning teams on those appeal results. Very good, very let's hope we keep it up, especially those decisions by the planning committee itself. Thank you very much, everybody. See you again next month. And somebody's left their phone on. Councillor Reid, well done. Thank you very much, everybody.